Hey, good morning and happy Sunday. It's Dr. Bill here, and it's time for another episode of Beyond Limits, where spirit meets science. So in my last episode, I talked about faith as hope, anchored in truth, and also as faith as a compass for personal and professional lives for us, right? And that they're both, faith and truth work together hand in hand to move you along your spiritual journey. They create resilience and transformation because the impossible has already occurred. We just need to step into it. And then those miracles that we often may not see come in hindsight are revealed through this alignment. But today we're going to take it another step further with truth and deep dive that even further and talk about truth as a level of consciousness and the challenge of recognizing and living it in our lives. So again, I'm not talking about external truths or dogma, but the inner truth of who we are. We are these spiritual beings having a human experience, and it is coming into alignment with that actual fact. Rather than thinking that we're just human beings having a spiritual experience. It's always about bringing things into alignment energetically and moving to that point on our journey in that space. So what is truth? Okay. Truth is a state of consciousness, if you will. It aligns us with the one power, the one source, the one presence. Whatever label you want to call that, there is a universal intelligence. It's behind all things. And this has been talked about in spiritual teachings for thousands of years, to be realistic about it. So it's not something new. But again, this truth of who we are is moving into this state of consciousness of what that is. Now let's contrast truth versus belief. And the difference is that beliefs change. We may believe in a certain thing for a period of time, but then we gather more information or we learn more about whatever that is that we believe in at the time, and then our beliefs change, they shift. However, truth is actually timeless. It doesn't change. It is the essence of who we are within, and that connection to the one power, the one source, the one presence. It's a universal law. So the reality is that truth operates whether or not we are aware of it. It's like gravity, right? We know if we drop this pen, from our hand up here, it's going to drop and fall to the floor. There's truth to that. That's gravity is for sure going to do that. It's not just going to hover there. Same thing for, if you look at a rose that's blossoming, right? And we look at that and we, even if it gets broken off the bud, the rose bud or something like that, another one will spring forth and produce a rose blossom. So that's timeless. It's going to continue to do that. If we cut the grass and because we want to keep it looking cut short or whatever, but the reality is if we stop cutting it, it's going to continue to grow. In fact, after we cut it, it just grows back. So that is the difference between truth. Whether or not we believe if we cut it that it won't grow back, obviously that's not true. The reality is, that the truth of it is that the grass grows by itself. It doesn't need any input from us or anything like that. So that's the metaphor to think about within our own spiritual journey, and how the truth of who we are, the essence of who we are within, that we must come into alignment. If you're even contemplating on your journey and you're even watching this podcast, and at some point in your life, everybody comes to this question, is like, who am I and why am I here? This can be distilled down to recognizing what is the truth of who you are. And you may be programmed in some way. Well, program is probably not the right word, but this essence of who you are as a spiritual being having a human experience. Now, we've all been blessed with certain gifts and talents, and it's how we express those through this spiritual being having the human experience that makes the difference in our experience in this world. So that's what truth is. Okay, so again, truth is timeless, it's universal, it doesn't change, and whether or not we're even aware of it, it's going to operate within our lives. So how do we recognize and acknowledge our truth? The funny thing is, actually many of us already know our truth, but we resist it. Because living it means we have to change. We have to be vulnerable. We have to let go of something that doesn't serve us energetically anymore. And that's really difficult to do. And the spiritual journey is not for the lighthearted, okay, the faint of heart, so to speak. It really requires us to do work. It doesn't mean that we go off and in the corner and we're meditating, or we go to a Buddhist temple and we visit somewhere in Nepal and go to a Buddhist temple and think that, okay, we did that, then all right, now we're living our truth. No, this is just opening up the door energetically and emptying the trash that's in that soul, or as our container, that's blocking this energetic alignment to be the full expression of who we are. So many of us resist that because we don't want to change. We don't want to be vulnerable. It's hard it takes a lot of courage to do that. And I know for myself, there's been many times in my life where I've come up against the truth of what it is, and I knew it, but I didn't step into it. I didn't move through that change and let go of something that wasn't serving me any longer. So the temptation for us as acting as a human being having this spiritual experience is to game the journey, okay? We want to game our spiritual journey, thinking we know better, okay? We want to push against alignment. I love this phrase. It's like, human beings are incredible species or whatever, we're animals or whatever, but we have the ability to reason. That's a beautiful thing, we have this ability to reason. The worst thing about humans, or human beings, is that we have the ability to reason through things. We can rationalize away everything. And so that's what we're fighting against within ourselves, right? And resisting. So what happens when we do that? Well, we begin to struggle. We burn out. We hit those rock bottom moments where we just hit the wall, and we wonder, and we sit there and we wonder, why is this happening to me? Why did I end up here? Okay, believe me, I've been in those places many times where I go, what am I doing, right? And it's because at some level we weren't acknowledging the truth of who we are and making that change, or letting go of something that didn't work in our life anymore, or business, whatever it was, and letting that go. This is the struggle. So I can tell you it's a lot easier if you just give up the resistance and move with the flow of that, okay? So like I said, there's been many times where I've resisted the truth and hit the wall. And so I'm going to share with you some personal stories some years ago and most recently. Let me go through that. So some years ago, and I probably haven't shared this with anyone because I'm speaking my truth now about everything. And so the reality is, I was in a marriage for 10 years at this point, and I knew then that it wasn't the right fit. But I stayed in it for 10 more years because I had this rationalization that I could fix it, that I could make it better, that I had a responsibility with my children who were younger, all of these things. These are tough decisions when you come up with something major like this. But the reality is, you know it at some level, subconsciously, that you need to make a change. But it took me 10 more years to make that change. And think about all the struggle I had in the interim because of that, because I didn't accept the truth of who I was and what I was supposed to be doing. And this is going to happen as you embrace your spiritual journey. You're going to have personal relationships, business relationships, friendships, things that are going to fall by the wayside. And it's not that it's cruel or that you need to do that, and this is a hard concept for the human ego to even think about. But if you look at any spiritual teachings or whatever, it talks about moving with the flow, moving into the truth of who you are, embracing this essence of oneness that comes and flows through you. And it can't do that if you're resisting. And even most recently for me is that, when I started my business NutriSelect, I didn't officially announce that until I think April of this year, and actually really May, when we launched a new website and brand and all that. But the reality is I've been working on that for a year and a half or more. And even further back, I'd say, going back to 2018, I've been looking at emerging technologies and how we advance research in my industry. So I'd already been thinking about doing this for some time, but I didn't fully step into that until I started hitting the wall and other things. I was laid off at the end of 2023 with Sanofi. I was working for them, and which was totally unexpected. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do now? Well, I had this concept then right after that to do that, but I waited another year before I actually made it official, because I was trying to find a job somewhere as executive, and we can get into all the details of the stories of why that didn't work out for all intents and purposes, it should have, right? Because I got 25 plus years experience in the industry or whatever. So, but why didn't that happen, right? Because I wasn't embracing my truth, which was, I am truly an entrepreneur and visionary. And that's unsettling for companies. They don't want somebody like that, and they won't tell you that, obviously, because it's discrimination, but they will feel it, right? And this is the other thing too, when you're not living your truth, others will sense your misalignment before even you do sometimes. So you think everything's great and it's moving along and, okay, this is going to happen, then it doesn't happen. Why not? This is when we need to take a step back and pause and dig into the kind of going within and trying to figure out and let the universe tell us what's really not aligned here. So the take-home message here is that the denial of truth creates friction. It's unavoidable. Because remember, truth is timeless. It's operating within you and your life, whether or not you want to acknowledge it or not. So why continue to resist that and deny that? Because it's just creating friction. It creates the struggle. And if you hold on to it too long, it results in those rock bottom moments in your life. And we can all think of examples like that. And sometimes it's extreme for that to happen to you, to get the wake-up call that says, hey, buddy, you need to move into your truth of who you are. And maybe part of the reason we don't do that is that, in fact, for sure this is part of it, is that we don't have the confidence in ourselves. We think that, if the truth is we're supposed to be doing this, a certain thing, and we think, well, I should be doing that. So one of my truths that I've acknowledged is to get back into public speaking in a big way. And when I made that decision to do that, then I got approached about doing a TEDx talk, because that's a huge platform, right, to do that. And I have a lot to talk about in my messages, and I don't know, dozens and dozens of talks that I've given over the years. That my proving ground for this was in the mid-2000s, where I was doing all this. But again, we resist that. And so this denial of truth creates a friction within us. And it's something we have to recognize. Once we recognize that, truth creates flow. Then everything starts to click and fall into place. because you've accepted the truth of who you are. You've stepped into that. You've moved into that space. And then suddenly those things will start to create flow. So using neutral select as the example as the business that I made official, as soon as I did that, I got all kinds of positive traction for the business that accelerated. Patent filing in June, signing LOIs, all these things started to happen. And most recently, increased the valuation of the company from 5 million to 10 million. So that doesn't happen if you're resisting your truth, if you're in denial about that. So you have to step through that. Truth, let's talk about this, is a compass in your life and business. Just like faith, truth is your compass. So in business, if you're not living your truth as a founder, entrepreneur, leader, people won't fully engage with you because they'll sense this dissonance. It doesn't fit energetically with them. They may not understand it, but they feel like, whatever. And I sensed it too when, I'd interview with executives, executive level role, and I could feel the resistance there that they felt threatened if they brought in somebody. A lot of people feel threatened by their little space there and think, okay, well, I can't bring in this person, rather than moving to a place of truth and seeing the real value of what this person may bring to the table and how it could actually enhance who they are and what they're doing as a business. So again, in business, it happens there. So, if you're feeling a lot of friction in your professional career and moving through that and it doesn't seem to be clicking for you, well, maybe it's time to take a step back, go within and evaluate the situation and start looking at that and see where the friction is, what's causing the friction, and what's the cause of that. Now, in life, relationships, your health, and creativity, they're all going to suffer when you avoid your truth. And I talk about it all the time in terms of living a healthy lifestyle. It's a holy trinity of mind, body, and spirit, right? You have to eat right, exercise, and have a spiritual practice, and those three work holistically within you to help you embody your truth and to move into this place of truth of who you are. So your relationships, whether it's business or personal, are going to suffer from that when you resist your truth. People who know you, this is another big one, people that know you will question your decisions and judge you. And that's another reason we resist and don't move into acknowledging the truth of who we are, what we should be doing, really, because we already know it subconsciously. We feel it inside, energetically. It's pulling us to do that. But we don't take that step because we talk to our brother, we talk to our parents, we talk to our kids. We go and get their feedback or whatever. But the reality is, even it's actually harder. They say, you can't change your family, but you can change your friends. Well, your family's always with you, whatever, and they know you best. And of course, they're not on your journey, just like they're on their own. Everybody's on their own journey. We need to respect that everybody's on their own journey. And maybe they're not embracing any sort of spiritual path at all. And that's entirely possible, as in my situation as well. Those family members that don't do that, well, they don't see the vision of that. So they couldn't possibly understand what you're going through and what you're feeling. And they're going to question you and your decisions and judge you and say, hey, you're crazy, man, if you're going to do that. No, you need to do this, this, and this. But in your gut, inside of you, you already know that's not the right answer. So this takes a lot of courage to move into alignment, to live your truth, because you may have to give up a 20-year marriage. You may have to give up a great job you've had for years, but it doesn't feel right anymore. I've said it before, if there's any universal constant, that is that things change. And why do they change? Because the flow, it's fluid. You moving through your life, personal, business, whatever it is, professional, things are going to change. You're not going to work for a company for 40 years. Nobody does this anymore. And maybe some decades ago, that was the consciousness and level of thinking as a culture. And the collective consciousness was that, oh yeah, you got to go get a job and you work there and then you retire and that's it. You work there 40 years. No, nobody does that anymore. So I feel like, in some level, our society and culture, and this is not just the United States, this is everywhere, is moving through a level of consciousness evolution here, an evolution of our souls. And because nobody does that anymore. Now, did technology change that way of we work and be in the world? A lot of things change. Again, they're going to change whether you embrace that or not. And the important part here is, where truth is this compass, is when you align that truth, nothing can stop you. Nothing. Because the truth carries its own momentum. That's powerful. You have the essence of that power within you when you acknowledge the truth of who you are and you seize that. Nothing can stop you. Nothing can change your vision. Nothing can prevent you from accomplishing what you want to do. Because, again, remember, truth is timeless. Just like the rose is going to blossom or the grass, it's going to continue to grow. You're going to continue to flourish. You're going to continue to do, no matter what life or anything that throws at you happens. You're not surviving. You are moving through into a place that you embrace your truth. It's powerful. Now let's talk a little bit about the energetics of truth. I've already been referencing energy, and it's all connected. If I take the spirit meets science concept of the scientific piece of this, truth is not an intellectual thing. It's not an intellectual exercise. It's an energetic thing. I mean, let's take the grass growing as the metaphor here, right? So, actually let's use a different metaphor. Well, let's call, I lived in Florida, and you can go out in central Florida, you can see all the orange grows with all the orange trees, right? It's abundant, and you see all these big red oranges on the trees and when it's time to harvest. And guess what? All those oranges get picked. The fruit of that tree gets picked. The tree doesn't die. And guess what happens? It produces fruit again. That's not going to change. That truth is timeless. And there's an energy and if you want to get on a scientific level, there's an energy to that. There's a biology to that, a plant biology to that, that's all based on energy. If you dig down to the quantum mechanics level, that doesn't change. So no matter what we do there, the trees, even if you cut down the tree and the seeds fell in the ground, the tree would come back. So there's an energy to that. There's an energetics of truth. And like I said, others often feel our truth before we acknowledge it in ourselves. I wish I hadn't done that so many times to myself, where I knew the truth of what I was supposed to do, but I resisted it because, I didn't want to rock the boat, or I didn't want to really speak my truth, because that takes a lot of courage, man. It takes a lot of courage. And to be that truth of who you are. And we have fear, and this is this difference of living your life in love versus fear principles. And if we're living in fear, well, then we're gonna stay in mediocrity. We're not going to move forward in our lives. And truth has a presence. Like I said, it just simply is. Like the orange tree, it simply is. The fruit will produce no matter what. That's what it's supposed to do. That's the energy. The orange tree knows the truth of who it is already, naturally. And like I said before, as conscious beings have the ability to reason, well, that gets in the way of truth, okay? It really does. If we were more like an orange tree, then we would be blossoming this full spiritual being and expression within our lives. So let's link that back to consciousness. Okay, so truth is a frequency. It's a state that we attune to. And how do we do that? We do it through our spiritual practice, everything that we're doing. Okay? And so let's talk about those practices for living your truth. Let's move into that. Of course, one way to do that is some daily reflection or journaling. Not just meditation. When I look at spiritual practice, I think about journaling. I think about writing things. I think about just having quiet time. I think about doing meditation and breath work, right? And quiet the mind and let the truth come to the surface, and ask the universe for that to happen when you quiet yourself and your mind. And ask yourself, am I aligned with my truth today? Ask the question to the universe. Don't try and answer it consciously. Just continue to sit quietly. And when you're in that energy, because it is an energy flow, when you're in that energy expression or energy space, then the answer comes always. I can tell you that after decades of doing meditation in my spiritual practice, every time I ask the universe, I get the answer. And it becomes so obvious. And some levels, many times, I already knew what the answer was, but I didn't want to acknowledge it. Okay? So you need to do the same thing. To go with that, sit there quietly, journal on this. Am I aligned with my truth today? Don't resist it. Whatever comes up, embrace it and engage with it. And sometimes another thing that I like to do is, some sort of creative expression, like writing or art or music, to help embody that truth. Because when you're in that energy, and it's something maybe you're talented at, I love singing, I love to do that. In terms of art, I've never been afraid to try anything, so I actually started picked up the brushes, special brushes, and the black ink, and started doing some years ago Japanese black ink painting, sumi painting, which I think is just a beautiful meditative practice for art. So any kind of creative expression is going to help you embody the truth of who you are. And then once you identify through those practices, then you'll know that you'll be able to name your truth to yourself and others, which opens the door to courageous conversations. Embrace those. You'll find as you move through that and really embrace that, it's like a weight lifted off of you, because you move into this place of knowing who you are truthfully as this person. Everyone's unique. Everyone's on their own unique journey. Don't compare yourself to anyone else that I need to be like that. No, you're your own unique individual. And identifying what your truth is for you is probably the most important aspect of moving into the space and connection with all that is and that oneness. But it will require action, inspired action. That'll come from your practice. And that'll open the door, in some cases, conversations you need to have that you may not want to have. Don't resist it. We move to this place of love, of knowing that this is the essence of who you are, and everything will fall into place the way it's supposed to. It always does. It always does. If it doesn't, and we're resisting or whatever, well, that's going to drive us down a rabbit hole that ends up where we probably don't want to be. So let's reflect for a moment, and let me ask you some questions, things for you to think about as you engage in your practice here, to identify the truth of who you are. First question is, do you know the truth of who you are? Do you have any idea? And what does that mean? Well, that's something that's going to require digging deep into yourself and sitting there with that. You may be in a job you've been in for 15 years, but it doesn't feel right anymore. There's probably something else that wants to come forth and emerge from you. Because if you're feeling that resistance, then yes, doesn't mean that it has to be. It could be the perfect fit for you. The passion is there. You love what you do and all that, and that's great. I know people like that. So you're already living your truth. But if you're feeling any kind of resistance or friction there, you probably aren't living your truth. And then that's the exercise to try and figure out, the essence of who you are, the truth of who you are, so you can move to the next phase on your journey. Second question. Where are you resisting or gaming your journey instead of surrendering to truth? Yeah, we love to game it because we think we know better. We're going to game the system. You can't game your spiritual journey, folks. You can't game anything. You may think you do, and it may work for a short period of time, but at some point you'll hit the wall. So ask yourself, where are you resisting or gaming your journey instead of just surrendering to truth? And it is a surrender, which means a letting go, of moving into the next phase, whatever. Last question. What do others sense about you that you've been unwilling to acknowledge? Well, that's a big one, okay? So you probably feel that already in those types of situations where you sense already what you think you know what they're thinking. Well, you can query that and find out what they're really thinking about that. But for sure, you're going to understand what that is already. And then if you do find that out outside of you, well, that's just a validation to know that, okay, yeah, I was supposed to do that. For example, I am with this podcast, okay? And I did public speaking with a meetup group in Palm Harbor, Florida from like 2013 to 2017. And I would speak every Saturday, almost nearly every Saturday. And there'd be 40, 50 people there every week. And this was my proving ground on my Spirit Meets Science and talks. And in fact, you can go to my Insights for the Soul podcast on Spotify. There's probably about 45 or so talks there that I gave during that time frame. And it was the foundation of my proving ground to talk about that. But it was hard for me to move into that and acknowledge that. So what is it for you? So what is the other sense about you that you're unwilling to acknowledge? And once you move into that, then things will start to click and fall into place. So let's wrap it up here. We'll close our episode today. And I just want to reinforce with you that truth is a powerful level of consciousness. So when you live it, resistance falls away and transformation unfolds. Every single time. It will do that for you. So I ask you, what will the truth do for you? That's what it will do for you. When you start living it, and the resistance falls away and the transformation unfolds. Please go listen to, you can go listen, like I said, to my previous talks that I gave, and check that out. And then also, as I was saying in terms of resisting or whatever, this podcast, Beyond Limits, I started to get feedback in the last 3 weeks from people would comment on posts or they'd message me, and people out of the blue that I don't even know. And also business contacts, as I was discussing, they'll reach out to me on LinkedIn, talking to them. They say, hey, have you thought about doing a business book? So this is something I have thought about in the past. If you look on my website, and please visit my website at drbillclark.life, and then you can click on the social media links and follow me on social media with LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and Instagram. But the message I was getting from that was, I need to do a book on that. So guess what I'm doing? I'm not resisting my truth. I'm actually pivoting. I have the 4 books that I'm already working on. I just published my first book, Divine Whispers, which is my book of poetry. It was a compilation of poems I wrote over a 15-year period. And so I invite you to go to the website, click on that. You can buy it on Amazon. And but then that wasn't it's not on my website, any concept of doing a business book. So I've actually gone back, started yesterday really working through this because I keep getting the message and validation. The truth is speaking to me, and now I'm moving into it. So guess what? There is a new book coming up on conscious leadership and the synthesis of where spirit meets science, which is really cool and very unique. And love the way that the book's coming together right now. And it's fun when you embrace the truth and you can move into something like that. So again, don't resist it. Don't be afraid to embrace the truth of who you are. Dig deep and find out what that is for you. Okay? And that's about it for today. So again, follow me on the website, social media. If you got any kind of reflections you want to share about your own hidden truths and share insights with me on social and my website, love to hear from you. And with that, I wish you a wonderful day and a wonderful week. With love and gratitude, I'm Dr. Bill.